Commander Zoroth of the Vraxian fleet sat in his command chair, staring at the vastness of space through the ship's observation window. His mind was calm, focused. Today was supposed to be just another routine mission, another planet to observe, another species to catalog. His orders were simple: study the humans on the distant planet Earth, assess their potential for future conquest, and report back. The alien race of the Vraxians had encountered many civilizations across the galaxy, and to them, humans were no different, a primitive species, easy to subjugate. But something was off. The moment Zoroth's fleet entered the orbit of Earth, his sensors began malfunctioning. At first, he dismissed it as a minor glitch, but soon the entire fleet experienced the same issue. Systems that had never failed before began to flicker, and his officers could no longer communicate properly through their advanced technology. It wasn't supposed to be like this. The technology the Vraxians had developed over centuries was far beyond anything humans could ever dream of. Yet, this small planet, with its seemingly insignificant inhabitants, was causing havoc with their ship systems. "Commander," reported Lieutenant Arvik, his voice strained, "the ship's navigational system is failing. We are being pulled off course." Zoroth's calm demeanor faltered for the first time. He stood up, looking out over the crew deck. His ship was no longer under his control. The moment the fleet had crossed into Earth's atmosphere, their advanced technology seemed to lose its edge. The humans hadn't done anything, they weren't even aware of their presence yet. But Earth itself was somehow resisting their presence, as if the planet itself had a will of its own. "Prepare for emergency landing," Zoroth commanded. "Activate shields and prepare for impact." The crew scrambled, the once calm deck now filled with tension. The Vraxians were experts in space travel, and they had never encountered an anomaly like this. The planet's atmosphere was dense, turbulent, and unpredictable. As the ship plunged downward, the hull groaned under the strain, sparks flying from the control panels. The lights flickered, and the ship shook violently. "We're losing altitude too fast. Brace for impact," shouted Arvik. The ship's hull slammed into the rugged terrain below, sending waves of violent shock through the crew. Zoroth gripped the arms of his chair tightly as the vessel crashed to the ground. The ship finally came to a halt with a loud, metallic screech, and silence descended over the wreckage. For a few moments, no one moved. The crew was stunned, disoriented, and unsure of their next move. Zoroth was the first to break the silence. He activated his helmet's comm system, speaking to his crew. "Assess the damage. We need to salvage the ship and prepare for immediate evacuation." As the crew slowly gathered themselves, Zoroth stepped to the ship's viewport. The landscape outside was unlike anything he had seen before. The planet was wild and chaotic, a stark contrast to the sterile environments the Vraxians were used to. Strange creatures scuttled in the shadows, and towering trees swayed in the breeze, their roots appearing to pulse with energy. It was as if the planet itself was alive, watching them. The air was thick with humidity, and the scent of wet earth and unknown plant life filled the alien commander's senses. Zoroth's mind raced. He had expected to find a primitive, underdeveloped species, one easily manipulated and controlled. Instead, the planet itself seemed to be a force to reckon with. Earth was unpredictable, and that alone made it dangerous. His mission was to observe, but now Zoroth was unsure of what they had stumbled upon. He looked over his shoulder, scanning the rest of his crew. "Move out. We need to find shelter and assess our surroundings," Zoroth ordered. The crew of Vraxians began to exit the wreckage, their weapons drawn, cautiously stepping onto the unknown world. They had been on many planets before, but none had felt as hostile as this. No planet had ever resisted their presence so strongly. Whatever was waiting for them on Earth, Zoroth knew it wasn't going to be as simple as he had thought. The real challenge had only just begun. The alien crew carefully made their way through the dense, unfamiliar jungle that surrounded the wreckage. Zoroth, though a seasoned commander, felt an uneasy sensation creeping into his chest. His senses, usually sharp and clear, felt dull here, as though the very air itself was clouding his thoughts. The planet's thick atmosphere made every breath feel heavier, and the sounds of the jungle, chirping insects, rustling leaves, and distant roars seemed to echo in his mind. "Commander," Lieutenant Arvik said. Breaking the silence, The terrain here. It's unlike anything we've encountered before. I cannot get a solid reading on the environment. The planet itself is interfering with our systems. Zorath nodded, but said nothing. His eyes scanned the jungle ahead, searching for any sign of life or movement. The foliage was thick and alive with strange, vibrant colors. Towering trees with broad leaves that seemed to shimmer in the dim light stood like sentinels around them. But it wasn't just the bizarre vegetation that unsettled Zorath, it was the feeling that they were being watched. The crew pressed forward, weapons raised, scanning every shadow and every movement in the underbrush. Despite their advanced technology and training, they had no idea what kind of threat this planet could pose. They had dealt with hostile planets before, but nothing had ever felt like this. The sense of danger was suffocating. Suddenly, a loud, shrill cry pierced the air. The crew tensed, their muscles tightening in response. Zorath instinctively reached for his blaster, his fingers brushing the cold metal as his eyes darted around. From the dense trees ahead, a large figure emerged, a creature tall and powerful, with glowing eyes and sharp, jagged features. It moved quickly, its form barely visible in the shadows. Zorath's heart raced. He could feel the tension in the air. This was no ordinary predator. "Get ready," Zorath ordered, his voice low and controlled. The crew formed a tight line, weapons aimed at the creature. It approached them slowly, studying them with its glowing eyes. The alien creature was unlike anything they had seen, a mix of insect-like and reptilian features. Its body covered in tough, armored scales. But then, in an instant, it leapt. The speed and power of its attack were astonishing. Zorath barely had time to react as the creature slammed into one of his officers, sending him flying backward. The others opened fire, but their energy weapons barely seemed to faze the creature. It snarled, its claws raking through the air, leaving deep cuts in the ground. Zorath knew that this battle wasn't going to be easy. They had no idea what kind of strength these creatures possessed or how to defend against them. As the alien creature advanced again, Zorath ordered his crew to fall back. They needed to regroup and figure out a strategy, but in this unknown jungle, every move felt like a gamble. With their retreat, the creature seemed to hesitate. Its eyes locked onto Zorath, a deep, almost calculating gaze. For a moment, the commander thought it might attack again, but the creature simply backed away, disappearing into the thick jungle from which it came. The crew was left standing in shock. They had barely survived their first encounter on Earth, and the overwhelming feeling that they were not alone on this planet was stronger than ever. Zorath turned to his team, his mind racing. "This planet is far more dangerous than we anticipated. We are not alone here, and it seems we have underestimated the unpredictable nature of this world." His words hung in the air. The reality of their situation was sinking in. They had come here to conquer, to study, to dominate, but the planet was fighting back. Every step they took seemed to pull them deeper into something far more chaotic and mysterious. And one thing was certain, they would need to understand this unpredictable world and its inhabitants if they had any hope of surviving. The dense jungle stretched on endlessly, its vastness swallowing the crew whole. The air, thick and humid, pressed down on them, making each breath feel heavier than the last. Zorath's mind raced with questions. The creature they had encountered, though only a single member of its species, had been stronger, faster, and more resilient than any enemy they had faced before. He knew the alien planet was unpredictable, but the raw power of its wildlife was beyond anything he had imagined. "Commander, we need to find shelter," Arvik said, his voice tight. "We can't keep moving in circles like this. The jungle is closing in around us." Zorath glanced at the lieutenant, noticing the fatigue in his eyes. The crew was exhausted, but there was no choice but to keep moving. With their ship damaged and their communications severed, they were stranded. They had no choice but to find shelter before nightfall. "We keep moving forward," Zorath ordered, his voice firm. "We find shelter. Stay alert." As they pressed on, the sounds of the jungle seemed to grow louder. Strange creatures rustled in the underbrush, and the distant screeching of what sounded like flying predators echoed through the trees. But it wasn't just the creatures that unsettled Zorath. It was the sense that something, or someone, was watching them from the shadows. The sensation gnawed at him, creeping under his skin and making him uneasy. Hours passed as they navigated through the dense undergrowth. Eventually, they stumbled upon a clearing, a small area of open ground surrounded by towering trees and thick vines. The air felt different here, less stifling, and the crew breathed easier for the first time in hours. Zoroth scanned the area cautiously, feeling the weight of the silence around them. "Let's make camp here," he said, gesturing for the crew to set up a perimeter. They gathered their supplies and began to build makeshift shelters. Zoroth couldn't shake the feeling that something was out of place. There was an odd stillness to the clearing, as if the world itself was holding its breath. As night began to fall, the jungle transformed. The strange sounds of the day turned into eerie, almost haunting noises. The temperature dropped sharply, and the once vibrant plants seemed to shift into darker, more ominous shapes. Zoroth stood at the edge of the clearing, watching the shadows lengthen, his eyes scanning every corner of the jungle. Suddenly, a flicker of movement caught his eye. He turned, but it was gone, swallowed by the darkness. His hand instinctively reached for his weapon, but he hesitated. The feeling of being watched grew stronger, more intense. The jungle wasn't just alive, it was aware of them. The thought chilled him. "What is it, Commander?" Arvik asked, stepping up behind him. Zoroth didn't answer at first. His gaze remained fixed on the shadows. "We're not alone here," he muttered. "I can feel it." He wasn't sure if it was the planet itself or something more sinister, but the tension in the air was palpable. The planet, once seen as a simple target, now felt like a living, breathing entity with its own rules and dangers. Every step they took, every move they made, felt like a test. The crew gathered around the fire. But Zoroth's thoughts were far from calm. How could humans thrive on such a world? What was it about this planet that made it so unpredictable, so dangerous? He had come to Earth expecting easy conquest, but now he understood this was no ordinary world, and the humans who lived here were more formidable than he had ever believed. As the night wore on, Zoroth's mind raced with new questions. The humans had proven themselves resilient, surviving on a planet that seemed to fight back against them at every turn. They were unpredictable, yes, but they were also survivors. And in the end, Zoroth realized it was this unpredictable nature that made them dangerous. The night dragged on, the sounds of the jungle intensifying as if the entire forest was coming alive around them. Zoroth could feel the oppressive weight of the darkness pressing in, and every rustle in the underbrush made his senses flare. He had seen many battlefields in his time, faced countless enemies across the stars, but nothing had ever unsettled him like this. The very planet seemed hostile, its atmosphere pushing back against the Vraxian presence as if warning them to leave. The fire crackled softly, its light flickering in the dark as the crew huddled around it. No one spoke much. They were all exhausted from the crash, the constant movement, and the tension of being on a world that didn't welcome them. Even the bravest of the Vraxians couldn't help but feel the unease that hung in the air. Zoroth sat, his eyes scanning the jungle's edge, watching for any movement. "Commander," Arvik's voice broke the silence, hesitant yet determined. "The human we captured. What do you intend to do with her?" Zoroth turned his gaze toward Arvik, his mind still preoccupied with the strange sensation that they weren't alone. The human Sarah, the young soldier who had been part of the group that first attacked them, was bound and held in a temporary shelter. She was the only one of her crew they had managed to capture. A strange thought lingered in Zoroth's mind as he remembered her calm demeanor amid the chaos. Unlike the others, she hadn't been driven by fear, but by something else. "I'm not sure yet," Zoroth replied quietly, "but she might hold the answers we need. The humans are unpredictable, but she may offer us insight." Arvik nodded, though his expression was filled with doubt. "She could be a trap, Commander. We cannot trust her." Zoroth stood and walked toward the shelter where Sarah was being held. His footsteps were quiet, purposeful. The human was seated, her back straight, her expression unwavering despite the situation. She looked up as he approached, her eyes meeting his with a defiance that surprised him. "Commander Zoroth," she said calmly, her voice steady despite the circumstances. "I assume you've come to interrogate me, but let me tell you this: humans don't break easily." Zoroth regarded her for a moment. "You're not like the others," he observed. "You seem different." She didn't flinch. "We all are, in our own way. You've seen our resilience. But let me ask you something, Commander. Why are you really here? You've invaded our world, but there's something you're not telling your crew. Zorath narrowed his eyes. You're more perceptive than I thought. Sarah smiled. Though it wasn't a smile of amusement, it was one of understanding. Humans have always been unpredictable. And right now, your greatest challenge is understanding that. We're not like the civilizations you've conquered before. We fight not just for survival, but for our right to exist. And that's something you'll never be able to control. Zorath stepped closer, his voice lower now. You're saying you'll resist us, even if it means your extinction? Her gaze didn't waver. We don't fear death. We fear the loss of what we've built. If you think you can break us, you're wrong. Her words struck Zorath deeply, something he wasn't prepared for. He had seen many species submit without question, but this girl was something else. There was no fear in her eyes, only resolve. And that alone made her dangerous. It was then that Zorath realized that perhaps he had underestimated humanity. Their unpredictability wasn't just a trait, it was their strength. We'll see, he said quietly, turning away. For now, you stay here, but don't mistake our silence for weakness. As he returned to his crew, his mind churned with uncertainty. He had come here to conquer, to study, but now he questioned everything. Sarah was right. Humans didn't just survive, they fought with a will that no alien species could predict. Zorath had thought he understood power, but he was learning that true power wasn't in domination. It was in the will to fight, to keep standing even when everything was against you. And that, Zorath realized, was something humanity had in spades. The days began to blur together as Zorath and his crew ventured deeper into the jungle. The alien commander couldn't shake the feeling that they were moving in circles, as if the very planet itself was toying with them. The land was alive, constantly shifting and changing, never allowing them a moment of rest. Even the air seemed different now, heavier, like it was charged with some invisible energy. And despite their advanced technology, the Vraxians couldn't escape the sense that they were being watched, their every move scrutinized by something far more ancient and powerful than themselves. Zorath's mind kept returning to Sarah, the human they had captured. She had proven herself more than just a soldier. She was a symbol of humanity's unpredictable nature, a force Zorath had yet to understand. Her words haunted him. We don't fear death. We fear the loss of what we've built. It was a simple statement, yet it resonated deeply. Humanity was not a species that could be easily broken. Their strength wasn't just in their technology or weapons, but in something more profound, more stubborn. As Zorath led his crew through the dense underbrush, a distant rumble shook the ground. His crew immediately dropped into defensive stances, eyes scanning the horizon. The sound grew louder, vibrating through the earth beneath them. It wasn't an earthquake, but something else, something deliberate. A loud, guttural roar echoed from behind them, and without warning, a massive beast emerged from the trees. Its eyes were glowing red, and its sharp claws scraped against the ground as it advanced toward them. It was unlike any creature the crew had seen before. Its body was a terrifying mix of reptilian and insectoid features, and it moved with a speed that was almost impossible to follow. The Vraxians immediately opened fire, but the creature seemed unaffected. It charged forward, its massive jaws snapping at the air. Zorath's heart raced as he watched his crew struggle to subdue the beast. Their energy weapons bounced off its thick hide with no visible effect. The creature swiped its claws at one of the Vraxian soldiers, sending him crashing into a tree with a sickening thud. Panic began to spread among the crew as they realized that their advanced weaponry might not be enough to defeat this creature. But then, amidst the chaos, Zorath remembered Sarah. She had been watching from her makeshift prison, her eyes locked on the scene unfolding before her. He ordered a pause in the firing and approached her cautiously. You were right, Zorath said quietly, his voice tinged with frustration. The human's unpredictability isn't just in their nature, it's in everything here. This planet, it's not just a world, it's a living force, and we don't understand it. Sarah looked at him with steady eyes. You're starting to see it, aren't you? She said, her voice calm despite the danger. Earth is alive. It fights to protect itself. And if you want to survive here, you'll need to think like we do. Zorath turned back toward the creature, still thrashing and growling. His mind raced as he took in her words. The creatures of Earth weren't just animals, they were part of the same unpredictable force that made humans so resilient. But there was something more to Sarah's words. She wasn't just speaking about the creatures or the land. She was speaking about the spirit of humanity itself. The beast roared again, snapping Zoroth out of his thoughts. His mind worked quickly. This wasn't just a matter of strength or firepower. They couldn't defeat the creature with brute force alone. The Vraxians had to adapt, just like humans did. Zoroth took a deep breath and gave the order to adjust their tactics. Focus on its legs. Zoroth commanded. Target the joints, weaken its movement. We'll fight smarter, not harder. As his crew followed the new instructions, the tide of the battle began to shift. The Vraxians worked together, targeting the beast's legs with precision. It wasn't long before the creature, exhausted and weakened, finally collapsed to the ground. The crew, though battered and weary, had won using strategy instead of raw force. Zoroth stood over the fallen beast, his thoughts swirling. This planet and its inhabitants had shown him something he had never experienced before: the power of adaptability. Humanity's unpredictability was not just a weakness, it was their strength. And Earth's creatures, much like the humans themselves, would always fight back, no matter how strong the enemy. As the crew collected themselves, Zoroth turned to Sarah. "You were right," he said again. "We've underestimated you, but we've learned, and we'll adapt." Sarah met his gaze with a calm smile. "It's not too late to learn more, Commander." Zoroth nodded, the weight of his realization sinking in. The Vraxians had much to learn, not just about the humans, but about this unpredictable world they had found themselves on. The days grew darker for Zoroth and his crew as they ventured further into the heart of the jungle. The initial excitement of exploring this strange world had faded, replaced by a growing sense of dread. Every step they took seemed to lead them deeper into something they couldn't fully understand. The planet felt as though it was alive, watching them, waiting for them to make a mistake. Zoroth found himself increasingly preoccupied with the idea of humanity's unpredictable nature. The more he learned, the more he realized that what he had once seen as a simple species easy to dominate and control was far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. The humans, despite their primitive technology, possessed a survival instinct that no other species he had encountered seemed to have. Their adaptability was unmatched and their resolve unshakable. He had underestimated them, and now the consequences of that mistake were becoming clear. "Commander, we've detected something." Arvik's voice broke through Zoroth's thoughts. Pulling him back to the present, Zoroth straightened. "What is it?" "A signal. It's faint, but it's coming from the human settlement we've been tracking. There's a high concentration of energy there, more than we've seen on this planet so far." Zoroth's heart quickened. This was the opportunity they had been waiting for. If they could capture the source of this energy, they might be able to regain control over their situation. With this, they could harness the human technology and neutralize the threat Earth posed. "We move out immediately," Zoroth ordered. "Prepare for a full-scale approach. We're going to find out what's behind this signal." The crew moved quickly, slipping through the jungle with practiced precision. They followed the faint signal, navigating their way through dense foliage and towering trees. The jungle seemed to grow quieter as they drew closer to their target. The birds and insects that once filled the air were gone, replaced by a tense stillness. It was as though the planet itself was holding its breath, aware of their every move. When they finally arrived at the source of the signal, Zoroth couldn't believe his eyes. In the clearing before him was a structure, a massive human settlement. It was unlike anything he had expected. There were no primitive huts or makeshift buildings. Instead, towering metal spires and intricate machinery covered the landscape, blending technology with nature in a way that seemed almost alien. "This isn't just a human settlement," Zoroth muttered under his breath. "This is something else entirely." The structure pulsed with energy, and it became clear that the signal wasn't just a transmission, it was some kind of power source. The humans had somehow harnessed the very forces of the planet to create something far beyond Zoroth's comprehension. "Commander, we should proceed with caution," Arvik said, his voice filled with unease. "This doesn't feel right." Zoroth nodded but didn't answer. He was too focused on the complex machinery before him. There was a power here, an ancient energy that the humans had learned to tap into. It was no longer just about conquering a species, it was about understanding how the humans had unlocked the planet's secrets and how to use that knowledge to their advantage. As Zoroth stepped forward, a shadow moved at the edge of his vision. His hand instinctively went to his blaster, but before he could react, a voice called out from the darkness, "Commander Zoroth." The voice was calm, but filled with authority. Zoroth's heart skipped a beat. He turned to find Sarah standing before him, her expression as steady as ever. She was no longer the frightened soldier he had captured. She was something else now, something far more powerful. "You're beginning to understand, aren't you?" Sarah said, her eyes locking onto Zoroth's. "Humanity's strength doesn't just come from fighting, it comes from adapting, from learning, and from using what's around us. You thought you could dominate us, but you were wrong. We've learned how to survive, how to thrive, and you can't control what you don't understand." Zoroth stood motionless, his mind racing. For the first time, he wasn't sure if he had the upper hand. Sarah's words echoed in his mind. This planet, this species, was more than he could handle. The battle wasn't just about physical strength or firepower, it was about knowledge, adaptability, and the will to survive. Zoroth glanced around at his crew, the weight of the situation settling on him. He had underestimated humanity, and now the true challenge was beginning. What started as a simple mission to conquer had turned into a fight for survival, not just against the humans, but against the planet itself. And he knew now, more than ever, that Earth would not be easily conquered. The jungle seemed to close in on them as Zoroth stood at the edge of the human settlement, his mind racing. The energy from the mysterious structure pulsed in the air, a constant hum that seemed to vibrate through his very bones. The realization that this planet, this species, was far beyond anything the Vraxians had ever encountered weighed heavily on him. Humanity wasn't just unpredictable, they were a force of nature, something that couldn't be easily understood or controlled. Sarah's words echoed in his mind. "We've learned how to survive, how to thrive." It wasn't just a boast, it was a truth. Humanity had faced extinction, wars, and countless challenges, yet they always found a way to adapt, to push forward, to overcome. Zoroth had thought he understood strength, but the humans had shown him that strength wasn't just in power, it was in persistence, in the ability to rise again when knocked down. As Sarah stepped closer, her presence calm but commanding, Zoroth could feel the tension in the air. The humans had made something of this world, something that Zoroth couldn't fully comprehend. They had unlocked the secrets of Earth, tapped into its energy, and created something that defied the laws the Vraxians had spent centuries mastering. And yet, it wasn't just the technology that made Zoroth pause, it was the spirit of humanity itself. The will to survive, to protect, and to defy all odds. "You still don't understand, do you?" Sarah said softly, her voice carrying an air of sadness. "You think you can just come here, take what you want, and leave. But Earth doesn't work like that. We don't work like that." Zoroth's eyes narrowed. He had been prepared for a military conflict, for a fight that he could win with superior strength and strategy. But this was different. The humans weren't just defending their home. They were defending their right to exist, to make their own choices. And no force in the universe, no matter how advanced, could take that away. "Commander," Arvik's voice broke through the silence, "we've lost contact with the rest of the fleet. They've been overwhelmed. We can't hold out much longer." Zoroth turned to see Arvik's concerned expression, his crew visibly shaken. The alien commander knew that the Vraxians were on the verge of losing everything. Their advanced technology, their overwhelming strength, it was all useless against the unpredictable, ever-changing nature of this world. The humans had found a way to fight back, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. They were adaptable, and that made them far more dangerous than any fleet Zoroth had commanded. He turned back to Sarah, his eyes locking onto hers. "What do you want from us?" he asked, his voice strained. Sarah's expression softened. "I don't want anything from you, Commander. I want you to understand. You came here to conquer, but Earth doesn't belong to you. It belongs to all of us, the humans, the creatures, the land. We protect it because we know it's ours. You may have advanced technology, but you'll never control this world." Zoroth stood silently, the weight of her words sinking in. He had come to Earth expecting a simple conquest, expecting to dominate a species that seemed so primitive in comparison to the Vraxians. But he was wrong. The humans had a resilience, a determination, and a connection to their planet that he couldn't fathom. And now, the very planet he had hoped to control was turning against him. "We're not going to fight anymore," Sarah said, her voice firm. "We've shown you that we're unpredictable, that we're not to be underestimated. But if you leave now, we can find a way to live in peace. If you stay, if you continue to try to conquer us, you'll find that humans are far more dangerous than you ever realized." Zorath's mind was a whirl of thoughts, the reality of their situation dawning on him. The Vraxians could not fight the planet. They could not fight humanity's will to survive. They had been outsmarted, outlasted, and outwitted by a species they had considered insignificant. He took a deep breath, the weight of the decision settling in. For the first time, Zorath understood what it meant to be truly defeated not by weapons, but by the spirit of humanity. The Vraxian fleet was broken, and the battle was over. Earth had won. Zorath turned to his crew, his voice steady as he issued the command. "We're leaving. Prepare to return to the fleet. It's time we learned when to retreat." As the crew turned to follow orders, Zorath stood in silence, watching Sarah and the human settlement. He had come to Earth expecting to conquer, but instead, he had learned a lesson he would never forget. Humanity was not to be controlled. They were a force that would rise again, no matter how many times they were knocked down. And that made them unstoppable.